Sometimes our tendency is to get rid of stuff, haul it off to the dump, when in reality there may be a lot that is still of value and can be brought to life again. For a few dollars, probably less than 40, a little manual labor and a few tools, this old wrought iron bench, chair, and side table can be made to look new again. Better tools will speed up the process, but there is really little that is very complicated about this. My neighbor runs across things from time to time that he hopes we can do something with, and son Ryan and I will see what we can do with this. Another video of another project from my neighbor is linked in the corner. It was a solid oak table that fell off his truck while he was moving it. We got creative with it and used inlaid turquoise pieces on some of the damaged areas. With the exception of this one piece screwed in place, this thing is held together with nuts and bolts. While taking it apart, I realized that we really only have one good crescent wrench in my tool bag for removing the nuts from the bolts. Since Ryan is using that, I pull out something else to help me get the nuts off my bolts. Here's how that conversation goes. Now, I get questions at times about things I pull out of this bag to use, like this wood chisel that functions as a scraper, a screwdriver, all kinds of things. You always wonder why I don't have a screwdriver handy. Well, in this case, I'm using my tile nippers that I've had for 40 years that I never use ever these days. So I'm using them as a wrench to help me to loosen up these nuts on these bolts. They work great.
That's great.
They're right in my pocket, always handy.
I feel like you're just talking to me like a normal human being.
Yeah.
Not worried about the YouTube community.
Oh, does it sound like I'm talking to the YouTube community? It probably does.
Totally. It's all good.
Oh, I do get those questions. We rarely miss an opportunity to razz each other a little when it's appropriate, and it was definitely appropriate here. That comes from spending a lot of time together over his 43 years. I didn't go to a lot of trouble to prep the iron for paint, primarily because this will be sitting out in the elements again almost immediately, so the paint will begin wearing off again very quickly. There was even some discussion about whether we should paint the metal again or not, or just leave it looking weathered with the new wood in place of the old. 5 of these guys, 48 by 2.5, 22 3/4 by 2.5. Yeah. Ryan took over from here and began the process of cutting the necessary pieces to build the replacement parts for the furniture. He's a pure lefty in everything that he does, including running the materials through the table saw. But as long as he positions himself to keep his hands and body away from the blade, that's what's important. I'm a partial lefty myself, so I get how things sometimes don't feel right if you're not letting your dominant hand take the lead. The part we had to think about a little was making the back wood frame for the bench and the chair. We ended up deciding that if we roughly mirrored the dimensions of the old oak pieces, that we would be pretty safe. We needed the cast iron pieces to fit back again inside the new wood structure that we were creating, so Ryan took his time in figuring this out and generally used the old pieces as a template for the new. The wood we were using is poplar, and we just happened to have some wide enough pieces to allow us to make the big arching cuts out of a single board. Prior construction had pieces joined together to make the thickness necessary for the width of the arches. Over time they separated due to the weathering and moisture getting into that joint. These back pieces are built kind of like you're making a cabinet face frame. In fact, a lot like you're making a cabinet face frame, except that the arches make it quite a bit more challenging. But ultimately 4 pieces are going to be joined together to make these face frames, and we definitely want the joints to be solid. The bandsaw is not totally necessary, but is a good tool for jobs like this if you have it. But the cuts could be made with a jigsaw, and that would work fine. The cuts would need to be sanded a little bit more. The top and bottom cuts for these rails can be made square with the face of the wood, so that's easy enough. You can see here there's a slight bevel on the inside edges of the cast iron. Ryan ended up figuring out that that was about an 8 to 9 degree bevel, so in order for the inside edges that aligned with the cast iron to fit closely with the shape, he cut the same 9 degree bevel on the inside edges of those wood parts. That explanation may not have been completely necessary, and in fact the frames probably would have worked out fine and looked good without worrying about addressing the bevel. But doing this does make everything look better aligned, and it was really not all that much trouble to make those cuts and create a better finished look for the whole project. When I bought this tool, I needed to make a couple of wood gates for a customer. I knowingly and willingly spent my entire profit from that job to purchase this tool. It's a Festool domino cutter, and it is pricey, so not something you buy on a whim. The same connections could be made with dowels or even biscuits from a biscuit joiner. I don't think I would use pocket holes and screws for these because really a mortise and tenon type of connection is probably the best for this project. Anyway, you can see the domino cutter makes quick work of creating these mortise type joints, and then the dominoes themselves are made from beech wood, so the glue ups are really simplified. The speed of not only cutting but assembling is also just outstanding. So if you can justify it from a cost standpoint as well as a need standpoint, it is a piece of equipment you wouldn't regret having in your shop. If you're new to the channel, first let me say thanks for watching. If you have a question or comment, I'd like you to know it's a real priority to me to read every comment, and I try to reply back if at all possible. If you look at comments on other videos, often you'll see that I don't mind giving pretty complete explanations to questions. At this point for me, it hasn't gotten overwhelming to keep up with your comments, and I really do enjoy hearing from you. If you found something valuable in a video or comment from me, I would appreciate it if you would click that subscribe button and the little bell next to it. That helps the channel grow and encourages us to keep exploring ways to make interesting content. This portion of the video is turning out to be so interesting because the need to be square is not a part of this glue up. We are making the cast iron piece that goes with the bench backrest fit inside the center part of this frame. To do that, everything needs to be curved, and remember, even the inner part of this has a 9-degree bevel on it as well. Anyway, all this process looks pretty cool as far as I'm concerned, but the funny thing about it is, when it comes right down to it, the diagonals still matter in keeping the whole thing square.
50.5 ish. Please be close, please be close, please be close. 50.5 shy-ish.
Ryan is getting down to the details now to begin finishing off the manufacturing part of this process, and next to come, staining and finishing, followed by reassembling of the pieces. We decided to cut a chamfer on all of the edges rather than using a round over bit. There was no specific intention in mind apart from this looks good too, and I actually think we had the bit set up in our small router already, so that made the choice easy. The bolts are recessed so that they will flush out with the surface of the wood frame. Ryan pre-drilled pilot holes with a smaller bit to give the larger holes a path to follow. That way the bit tracks perfectly in the center of the recess. We drill a lot of pilot holes in the shop. Next is to do a little touch-up sanding. We didn't get too carried away with this because once again this is outside furniture and our material was surfaced and planed at the lumberyard, so a little light sanding was all that was needed before stain. We're using English chestnut stain, which over the years has been one of the most popular color choices from our customers when they've settled on cabinetry in bathroom remodels we've done. The other popular choice has been early American stain, which is very close to this color. It just has a little bit more of a brown tint rather than the reddish tint that comes with the English chestnut. And both of these are Minwax products. A large number of videos I've done on my channel have been about those bathroom remodels I mentioned, so check out the link at the top if you're interested in seeing something about those projects. After letting the stain dry overnight, next step is to apply a finish. Since these pieces are going to be outside, we are using this spar urethane product, which is designed for indoor and outdoor use. It's a little more trouble to work with because you need to use mineral spirits to clean up rather than soap and water, but it's a really good product for projects like this. We are applying 2 coats front and back, top and bottom, with a foam brush and sanding lightly between the coats to knock off any raised grain in order to get as smooth a finish as possible without spraying. So back to where we started on the demo, except for putting it back together, I grabbed an open-end wrench to tighten the nuts that I'm installing and still letting Ryan use the crescent wrench. My tool bag is something that I always take out with me on a job site, and so it has all the hand tools that I could potentially need on a spur-of-the-moment type situation. So that's why I'm used to going to it and grabbing out of it whatever works to fit a particular need at a particular time on the job site. I also toss screws, small hand tools, anything I might lose track of into the bag, and most of the time if I'm missing something, I can go to that tool bag and empty it if I need to and generally find what it is that I'm looking for. We are mostly done now, and the only thing we need to add back again is this metal strap that gets attached to the bottom of the bench to keep these slats somewhat aligned with each other over their 4-foot span as the wood starts to move a bit as it ages. The video began here with the old worn-out stuff in my front yard, but now that's been replaced with this brand new looking bench, chair, and table. I'm glad my neighbor didn't toss this stuff because he and his family will enjoy having this in their yard. My only regret is that I haven't found similar pieces that I can redo and put out in my yard, but that's coming. I've got the video linked on top that I referenced at the beginning of this video about the oak table I reworked with turquoise accent pieces in it for my neighbor. On bottom here's another video that I picked that may also be suited to your interest. Thanks again for sticking around to the end, and as I like to say, there's always something going on around Dobbs Workshop, so be sure to check back regularly. Thanks again for watching.